The CIA was supposed to be the sharpest intelligence machine on Earth. Secret agents, classified files, serious men whispering in rooms with no windows. And then someone said, "What if we made a spy cat?" Today, we are looking at the dumbest CIA operations ever planned, funded, tested, or somehow approved by adults with security clearances. Some are brilliant, some are terrifying. Some feel like history was written by a raccoon with a Pentagon badge. 1. In the Museum of Spectacularly Bad Ideas, Let's Control the Weather already deserves its own dusty glass case. But apparently that was not ambitious enough because the CIA also tried to see whether lightning could be turned into a weapon. Not symbolic lightning. Actual skyfire. The plan was basically to point nature's angriest electrical tantrum at an enemy and hope it obeyed government paperwork. Imagine the meeting. Gentlemen, thunderclouds have been acting independently for too long. It is time we bring them under American management. It sounds less like intelligence work and more like the first chapter of a comic book villain's diary. Unsurprisingly, the project went nowhere because lightning does not take orders, file reports, or care about national security. Even the CIA eventually had to admit that some things are better left to the clouds. 2. Project Artichoke sounds like a harmless vegetable experiment until you learn it was actually about creating a mind-controlled assassin. Because during the Cold War, apparently every nightmare idea got at least one government meeting and a budget. The CIA wanted to combine hypnosis, drugs, psychological pressure, and memory manipulation into a real-life human weapon. Someone who could be triggered by a secret signal, complete the mission, and then remember nothing. That is not science. That is a spy thriller written by a teenager after too much soda. And the margin for disaster was insane. What if the trigger word was something normal like coffee or invoice? Suddenly your sleeper assassin activates in a diner because someone asked for the bill. The whole concept was terrifying, cruel, and deeply stupid, turning a person into a remote-controlled murder appliance with terrible customer support. 3. In the Philippines, the CIA decided that normal counterinsurgency was not dramatic enough, so they leaned into local folklore and basically auditioned for the role of monster. To scare communist rebels, agents spread rumors that the aswang, a blood-drinking creature from Filipino legend, was hunting in the hills where guerrillas were hiding. But they did not stop at campfire stories and spooky whispers. According to accounts of the operation, they staged corpses to look like vampire attacks, complete with puncture wounds and drained blood, so rebels would think a supernatural predator had joined the war effort. That is commitment to psychological warfare on a level that needs therapy. They did not just tell people, there is a monster out there. They turned the battlefield into a horror movie set. At some point, you stop being spies and become the special effects department of nightmares. 4. The CIA's spy animal phase was not limited to cats, birds, and other creatures that clearly never signed employment contracts. They also looked at dolphins and thought, yes, that ocean genius should carry explosives. Project Oxyjas aimed to train bottlenose dolphins to swim toward enemy ships and attach explosive devices. On paper, this probably sounded very slick, like something from a glamorous 1960s spy show. In reality, there was one small problem. Dolphins are smart, but they are not patriotic little submarines. Teaching them to reliably distinguish between Soviet vessels and American vessels was not exactly simple. Picture the project manager watching a highly trained dolphin glide happily toward the wrong aircraft carrier with a live mind and a cheerful aquatic attitude. The idea eventually sank, proving once again that animals are not unpaid interns for the intelligence community. 5. After trying to manipulate rain in Vietnam, the CIA and the American war machine moved into something even weirder: battlefield ghost theater. Operation Wandering Soul involved helicopters flying over the jungle at night, while loudspeakers blasted eerie recordings meant to sound like the restless spirits of dead Viet Cong soldiers. The message was simple: surrender, go home, or suffer forever as a wandering ghost. So instead of just dropping leaflets, they created the world's creepiest jungle podcast. Imagine being an exhausted guerrilla fighter in the dark, hearing fake dead comrades moaning through the trees like a discount haunted house with military funding. It was psychological warfare built on local beliefs about burial and the afterlife, but the execution feels almost absurdly theatrical. Less strategic genius, more government-sponsored ghost tour with helicopters. 6. The CIA's obsession with Fidel Castro became so cartoonish that you half expect to find a drawing of a falling anvil in the files. Among the many bizarre assassination ideas, the exploding cigar remains the absolute classic. This was not a novelty cigar that makes a silly pop at a birthday party. This was a cigar packed with enough explosive force to turn a relaxing smoke into a very final political statement. Somewhere, serious men in serious rooms discussed this like it was a normal workplace brainstorm. Poisoned drink? Too ordinary. Exploding seashell? Interesting. A cigar that detonates in his face? Excellent. Promote that man. It had the emotional maturity of a prank shop and the moral weight of an assassination plot. A covert operation? Barely. It was more like a lethal practical joke wearing a government badge. 7. During peak Cold War panic, the CIA worried that the Soviets might invade America through Alaska, because apparently even geography was now suspicious. Their answer was Operation Washtub. Create secret stay-behind resistance cells made up of local Alaskans, already armed and trained, ready to fight a guerrilla war if the Red Army showed up. In theory, it sounded rugged and cinematic. Hunters, fishermen, wilderness experts, all vanishing into the snow to defend freedom. In practice, the recruitment pitch was less appealing. Would you like to interrupt your life and possibly die in a frozen anti-Soviet apocalypse that may never happen? Shockingly, not many people were thrilled. Alaskans were busy surviving Alaska, which is already a full-time job. The plan collapsed into awkward reality, proving it is hard to build a resistance movement when your target recruits would rather go fishing. 8. If you were a captured CIA agent, the agency had an escape solution for you, and unfortunately, it involved courage in a very specific direction. The infamous rectal toolkit was a small capsule filled with tiny escape tools like saws, drills, and other miniature gadgets, designed to be hidden where enemy searchers were least likely to look carefully. Someone designed this, someone approved this, someone probably presented it in a meeting with a straight face and a pointer. And then some unlucky agent had to receive the briefing. Here is your emergency equipment. Please do not ask where it goes. Forget standard employee benefits. This was workplace gear that required physical preparation and a heroic lack of dignity. The phrase "thinking outside the box" does not apply here. This was thinking aggressively inside one very uncomfortable box. 9. After cats proved to be terrible intelligence assets, the CIA did not stop. They simply changed animals and hoped feathers would fix the problem. The next candidates were ravens, trained to drop listening devices on windowsills near target buildings. The logic was almost beautiful in its stupidity. Ravens are smart, ravens can fly, therefore ravens are loyal Cold War delivery agents. Unfortunately, ravens are also mischievous, independent, and probably more interested in shiny objects than geopolitics. The agency spent serious money trying to turn them into biological drones, but the birds were not exactly eager civil servants. Give a raven an expensive bug, and it might deliver it, or it might drop it on a random pedestrian, hide it, trade it mentally for bird satisfaction, or just leave because bird reasons. Once again, nature declined the job offer. 10. After discovering that animals behave like tiny anarchists, the intelligence world somehow wandered into an even less reliable field: psychic espionage. Project Stargate spent years and millions of dollars exploring remote viewing, where people claimed they could mentally perceive distant places, objects, or events. Instead of sending satellites or spies, they asked alleged psychics to locate Soviet sites, missing people, and hidden military secrets from a comfortable room. Imagine the briefing. "All right, Gary, please close your eyes, ignore the vending machine, and mentally visit a missile facility we cannot legally enter." The results were wildly inconsistent, which is a polite way of saying that national security should not be built on vibes. It was espionage by crystal ball, except even a toy fortune-telling ball has the decency to occasionally admit it has no idea. 11. The CIA understood that propaganda mattered, but sometimes their version of winning hearts and minds looked like someone attacked politics with crayons. One example was the secret funding of anti-communist comic books in Latin America. These were not innocent superhero adventures where a masked hero saves a cat from a tree. They were dramatic, colorful, aggressively obvious stories where communists were shown as monstrous villains and pro-American characters glowed with heroic freedom energy. The idea was to fight complicated political movements through comic panels, speech bubbles, and moral lessons with the subtlety of a frying pan. Imagine being a kid who just wants action scenes and instead gets a lecture about ideology from a square-jawed hero named something like Captain Liberty. It was cultural warfare, but with capes, villains, and the emotional depth of a school poster. 12. When living animals kept refusing to behave like professionals, the CIA moved toward building mechanical ones instead. That is how you get inventions like the Insectothopter, a tiny dragonfly-shaped surveillance drone that sounds brilliant until reality walks in carrying a wrench. For its time, the miniaturization was genuinely impressive. The problem was power. This delicate little spy insect used a miniature gas engine, which meant it was less silent dragonfly and more angry flying lawn equipment. Instead of gliding invisibly through the air, it risked buzzing around like a furious mechanical mosquito with government funding, probably terrifying birds and crashing into the nearest wall. The concept was ahead of its time, but the technology was not ready to make it elegant. So they basically built the future, then powered it with the energy of a tiny broken weed whacker. 13. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union treated the planet like a science lab, where the safety manual had been thrown into a volcano. In 1958, American nuclear tests called Teak and Orange detonated bombs high in the atmosphere to see what would happen. And what happened was not subtle. The blasts created enormous artificial auroras visible from far away, turning the sky over parts of the Pacific into a terrifying nuclear light show. They also disrupted radio communications across a massive area, because apparently exploding nuclear weapons in the upper atmosphere can have side effects. Who knew, besides anyone with common sense? It was the kind of experiment where the result was both scientifically interesting and deeply insane. They wanted data, and accidentally gave the night sky a radioactive nightclub phase. 14. In Vietnam, the CIA looked at the war and decided that one thing missing from the strategy was more rain. Project Popeye was an attempt to extend monsoon conditions by seeding clouds over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, hoping heavy rainfall would turn key supply routes into mud, misery, and logistical soup. On paper, that sounds like clever environmental warfare. In practice, it feels like trying to defeat an enemy by making the weather slightly more annoying. Gentlemen, we cannot stop the supply lines, but perhaps we can make everyone damp. The North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces, who were already operating in jungle conditions, probably did not collapse in shock at the discovery of rain. The plan had that classic Cold War confidence. If we cannot control the battlefield, maybe we can annoy the sky until it helps us. 15. At some point during the Cold War, someone apparently looked at global ideological conflict and thought, what if we solved this with a love potion? The CIA explored chemicals that might make enemy troops more emotionally sympathetic toward America, because nothing says serious geopolitics like trying to manufacture affection in pill form. The dream was absurd. A committed communist swallows a substance, and suddenly he is tearing up at the sight of an eagle, craving hamburgers, admiring denim, and humming patriotic tunes. That is not counterintelligence. That is a Saturday morning cartoon with a security clearance. The whole idea treated political loyalty like a minor mood problem, as if decades of ideology could be reversed by chemistry and optimism. Eventually, reality won, because international conflict is not usually fixed by slipping someone a capsule of "please like us now." 16. The CIA has a long history of backing people who later became problems large enough to require a whole new plan. Jean Bedel Bokassa, ruler of the Central African Republic, is one of those cases where our guy turned into, why is our guy holding an imperial coronation that costs a fortune? Bokassa declared himself emperor in a ceremony so extravagantly expensive it looked like Napoleon cosplay staged during a national budget crisis. His rule became infamous for brutality, corruption, and grotesque rumors that made him sound less like a leader and more like a villain rejected for being too obvious. Supporting unstable strongmen is always a gamble, but this one aged like milk in the sun. Eventually, getting rid of him became its own operation, a perfect example of foreign policy stepping on a rake and then acting shocked when the rake hits back. 17. As if the rectal toolkit were not enough evidence that one department had taken a strange creative direction, the CIA also developed a tiny tracking device intended to be hidden inside a person's rectum and used as a homing beacon. At this point, you have to imagine one technician in the room raising the same solution to every problem. How do we hide the toolkit? I have an idea. How do we hide the tracker? Same idea. It feels like a whole research branch briefly confused espionage with the world's worst medical exam. Even by Cold War standards, where the bar for weird was already buried underground, this was extreme. Thankfully, the device was never used. Somewhere along the line, someone finally looked at the plan and said the rarest sentence in intelligence history: maybe this is too much. 18. The CIA once looked at ordinary house cats wandering around foreign compounds and saw potential spies. This was the first, simpler step before the agency moved into full cyborg cat territory. The idea was basically to feed cats near Soviet locations and hope they would hang around long enough to overhear something useful. Which is adorable, because cats do not serve governments. Cats barely serve the people who buy them food. The cats accepted the taxpayer-funded snacks because of course they did, and then wandered away to pursue their actual strategic priorities: napping, judging humans, and knocking objects off high places. It was an intelligence operation defeated by the ancient truth that you cannot bribe a cat. You can only temporarily rent its presence until it remembers it has something better to ignore. 19. Espionage relies on secret signals, but sometimes those signals sound less like spycraft and more like summer camp arts and crafts. The CIA had a shoelace communication system where agents tied their shoes in specific ways to send messages like "Danger, follow me," or "I have information." Picture Cold War Berlin. The situation is tense. The drop point might be compromised. Does the agent use a sleek transmitter or a hidden radio? No. He crouches in the street and starts performing emergency macrame on his footwear. Nothing says covert professional like suspiciously retying your shoes for 90 seconds while trying not to look panicked. And what happens if you wear loafers? Are you immediately disqualified from espionage? The concept was practical in theory, but visually it was pure comedy. International intrigue held together by knots. 20. In the 1980s, the CIA supplied Stinger missiles to Afghan Mujahideen, fighters battling the Soviet Union. Militarily, the weapons were effective. The problem came later, when the Soviets left and the agency suddenly realized it had distributed extremely powerful anti-aircraft missiles to a loose network of armed groups in one of the most unstable regions on Earth. That is when the panic sequel began. The CIA had to run a major buyback effort, sending people around Afghanistan with cash to recover weapons they had previously handed out. It is hard to imagine a more perfect foreign policy. Oops. First, they gave away the missiles. Then they spent years trying to buy them back. It was like lending someone your chainsaw during a neighborhood dispute, then realizing he now owns the chainsaw and no longer returns your calls. 21. Nothing captures Cold War madness quite like the backpack nuke, officially known as a man-portable atomic demolition munition. The phrase alone sounds like someone tried to make tiny nuclear bomb in a bag sound less terrifying by dressing it in bureaucracy. The idea was that one person could carry a small nuclear device behind enemy lines, place it near a target, set the timer, and then somehow have a future. That last part was always a little vague. This was not a normal weapon. It was a travel-sized apocalypse with shoulder straps. The entire plan depended on one exhausted human being not slipping, panicking, getting captured, or making a mistake while carrying enough destructive power to ruin everyone's day permanently. Imagine the briefing. Your mission is simple. Walk carefully, and please do not invent World War III. 22. In one of the most childish psychological warfare concepts ever imagined, the CIA reportedly considered attacking Soviet morale by dropping extra-large condoms across the Soviet Union. But the real punchline was the label, Made in America, size medium. That was the supposed masterstroke. Not diplomacy, not economic strategy, not a secret alliance. Just a mass airdrop of weaponized insecurity aimed directly at the Soviet male ego. It is international espionage reduced to locker room humor with a parachute. You can picture some poor Soviet official writing the report with dead seriousness. Comrades, the Americans have begun a new campaign of anatomical propaganda. The plan was absurd, petty, and almost impressive in how juvenile it was. Sometimes Cold War strategy looked less like chess and more like someone writing insults on a bathroom wall. 23. The inflatable dummy idea was already strange, but the CIA apparently looked at it and thought, what if we made this even more complicated? Enter the trunk version of Jack in the Box, an escape device for agents hiding in cars. The system could pop open the trunk, push up a realistic mannequin into view, and give the real agent a chance to roll out and disappear. In theory, it was a brilliant distraction. In practice, it sounds like a magic trick designed by people with unlimited funding and no fear of looking ridiculous. How many tests went wrong before it worked? How many agents were accidentally flung into pavement like luggage with legs? It was over-engineered, theatrical, and deeply government in spirit. Instead of solving a problem simply, they built a spring-loaded mannequin circus in the back of a car. 24. One of the most audacious CIA projects involved trying to recover a sunken Soviet nuclear submarine from the ocean floor. To do it, they worked with billionaire Howard Hughes and built the enormous Hughes Glomar Explorer, officially presented as a deep-sea mining ship. In reality, it had a giant secret claw designed to grab the wreck from the abyss. This was basically a billion-dollar arcade claw machine, except the prize was a Soviet submarine full of intelligence treasure, and just like a real claw machine, it almost worked, then broke your heart. The claw managed to lift part of the submarine, but the wreck split apart during recovery, and key sections fell back into the deep. After all that money, secrecy, and engineering, the ocean simply said no. It was a stunning operation, but also one of history's most expensive near misses. 25. In the endless Get Castro file, the poison pen deserves a special place for combining assassination with office supplies. This was not a pen that wrote poisonous notes. It was fitted with a tiny hypodermic needle, designed so a Cuban asset could get close to Castro and jab him without detection. The idea sounds like something a Bond villain would pitch after skipping breakfast. Even better, when the CIA showed the device to the man expected to use it, he reportedly rejected it and called the plan laughable. That is a rare level of failure. Your own hired conspirator looks at your assassination gadget and says, "No, this is stupid." The agency had built a tiny murder pen so ridiculous that the person supposed to carry out the mission basically gave them a performance review from hell. 26. Hiding a listening device usually requires subtlety. But the CIA once went in the opposite direction and disguised an entire bug as a tree stump near Moscow. Not a little microphone hidden inside a stump. The stump itself was the surveillance device. It even had solar panels cleverly camouflaged on top to keep it powered. Technologically, that is impressive. Visually, it is also hilarious. Because if a brand new, oddly perfect, slightly artificial-looking stump appears in a sensitive forest, the KGB might notice. Especially if that stump looks like it was designed by engineers who have only seen trees in brochures. Eventually, Soviet security found it, because the most suspicious object in nature is the one trying too hard to be natural. As spy gadgets go, it was brilliant. As camouflage, it was basically a wooden sign reading, "Please do not inspect." 27. For an agency built around secrecy, the CIA has occasionally moved through the world with the subtlety of a marching band falling down stairs. One embarrassing example came during a training exercise in Washington, D.C., when agents planted a fake bomb at a power station to test security. The problem was that a real security guard found it and, quite reasonably, assumed it was an actual bomb. Police were called. Emergency procedures kicked in. The city got a genuine scare from what was supposed to be practice. This is the spy world equivalent of rehearsing a magic trick and accidentally setting off the fire alarm. The elite professionals failed so loudly that ordinary security did exactly what it was supposed to do. Honestly, the guard deserved applause. He spotted the threat. The CIA accidentally became the threat. 28. Losing a drone is embarrassing. Losing a cutting-edge secret drone to a rival power is the kind of mistake that makes everyone in the room stare silently at the floor. The D-21 was a high-speed reconnaissance drone capable of flying at over Mach 3, an astonishing piece of technology for its time. During a mission over China, one malfunctioned and crashed in Chinese territory. That was not just a lost aircraft. That was like wrapping advanced aerospace engineering in a bow and delivering it to the people you were spying on. The entire point of the mission was to gather secrets, and instead, the operation donated secrets. It is the intelligence equivalent of writing down your passwords, taping them to a brick, and throwing the brick through your enemy's window. A spectacular self-own with wings. 29. For agents who needed a quick disguise, the CIA developed an instant disguise kit, which sounds slick until you realize it involved inflatable body parts. An agent could wear a hidden harness and use a small pump to create a fake belly, broader shoulders, or a bigger backside, changing their silhouette in a hurry. In theory, clever. In practice, imagine trying to do this while being followed. You duck into an alley, start frantically squeezing a hand pump, and suddenly a crooked beer belly balloons under your shirt like you are transforming into a low-budget parade float. What happens if the system leaks? Do you slowly deflate during a tense conversation with border police? The concept was creative, but the execution feels dangerously close to slapstick. Master of disguise, yes, but only if no one hears the squeaking. 30. When CIA officers were tailed by the KGB in Moscow, they needed ways to vanish without making the disappearance obvious. One solution was Jack-in-the-Box, a system that could rapidly inflate a lifelike dummy in the passenger seat while the real agent slipped away. The result was brilliant and deeply funny. A Soviet surveillance team might spend hours following a car occupied by a fake person full of air and American smugness. Imagine the report. Subject remains seated. Subject has not blinked. Subject may be unusually disciplined or possibly rubber. As ridiculous as it sounds, the idea had real tactical value. It bought time, created confusion, and turned deadly serious counter-surveillance into a humiliation trap. Somewhere, at least one KGB officer probably realized he had been tracking an inflatable man and chose never to speak of it again. 31. When feeding cats failed, the CIA escalated in the most Cold War way possible, by spending serious money to surgically create a spy cat. Operation Acoustic Kitty involved implanting a microphone, transmitter, and battery inside a living cat so it could wander near conversations and secretly record them. The plan assumed two wild things: that the technology would work and that a cat would follow instructions. After years of work and a huge budget, they released the feline agent for a field test. According to the famous version of the story, it walked into the street and was immediately hit by a taxi. Years of research ended in seconds, not because of Soviet counterintelligence, but because of traffic. It was tragic, absurd, and possibly the most expensive reminder in spy history that cats do not understand mission objectives. 32. Operation Gold was one of the grandest espionage schemes of the Cold War. The CIA and British intelligence dug a secret tunnel from West Berlin into East Berlin to tap Soviet military phone lines. Engineering-wise, it was incredible. They worked in secret for more than a year, built a massive underground tunnel, and connected to communication cables. The problem was that the KGB knew about it before the tunnel even became useful, thanks to a Soviet mole. So for months, Western intelligence listened proudly, believing it had cracked open a treasure chest of secrets, while the Soviets carefully allowed information to pass through. It was spycraft as theater. The CIA thought it had built a hidden ear under Berlin, but the other side had already read the script. Basically, they spent a fortune to eavesdrop on a conversation written for them. So after psychic spies, exploding cigars, fake vampires, inflatable dummies, weaponized dolphins, and one deeply unfortunate cat, the real question is simple. Which CIA operation was the dumbest of them all? And which insane plan did we leave out that deserves to be publicly roasted next? Drop it in the comments, because this list clearly proves one thing. Classified does not always mean clever. And if you want more weird history that sounds fake but somehow happened, hit like and subscribe.